Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Progressive Discussions. And I want to say, I want to give a happy belated Ishtar, Pagan Easter, happy Pagan Easter to all of you people out there that know the truth about these holidays. Mm-hmm. And I'm here with Gary W. Owens. Sir, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty good. You?
Post, not too bad. Post Ishtar, and we have a really deep, hard-hitting topic this week for Progressive Discussions, and we are, of course, we're streaming live on YouTube, and we have the chat window open on the right. Now, I noticed before we sink our teeth into the show, our piranha teeth. Or bull shark. I noticed on CNN they have been mentioning that about 1/3 of the Democrat Congress is composed of centrist and moderates, and they keep mentioning it over and over, which is why I choose to say sayonara, adios to the Democratic Party. I do not want any affiliation with them, even though they kind of pressure people into choosing either Republican or Democrat in order for you to vote in the primaries. Otherwise, if you're an independent, you can't participate in the primaries. It's which is not fair. But yeah. I have no interest in supporting any centrist, moderate Democrat, and some of them are making it very obvious that they are. Like, what's his last name? Buttigieg, or the guy with from South Bend, Indiana, mayor that's running for president. He came out. He's gay, which is fine, and he's highly intelligent. But he doesn't believe in free public universities and healthcare, free healthcare for all. So he's really not a true progressive at all. Mm-hmm. And some of them are making it obvious that they're not.
Right.
That they're a centrist is probably most likely like a conservative Republican that is sneaky about it, like you were explaining last week. They're not like in your face obvious with their agendas. They kind of pander to the population. I feel your pain and all that, but they're really corporate whores, like mainstream media. Most of them are corporate whores because they'll never tell the public how they really feel, or they'll never, like Chris Cuomo. Well, Chris Cuomo is the only one who will tell off someone like Kellyanne Conway. But I'm saying a lot of them try to stay neutral because the fat cats sign their paychecks.
Right.
So I'm just tired of hearing centrist, moderate Democrats because they're just, like a flock of parrots of different color feathers. They're still parrots.
Right.
They're still controlled by the oligarch puppet strings, the puppet masters pulling the strings. Now, Donald Trump has something to say. My attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says it is not illegal to receive campaign related information from the Russians. It is perfectly fine to receive any information from the Russians regarding when a Republican or myself runs. Yeah, that's what the Penguin from Batman, Rudy Giuliani, said recently.
Oh God.
Yeah, it is not illegal. It's fine to have the Russians help you out. Okay, Penguin.
Yeah.
Now it's all you.
All right, so you were right. We are going to be hitting a very hard-hitting discussion in this video. This one's going to be not really as fun as the last few. I'm going to try to make it as fun as I can. This one's going to be like an intro to socialism, its theory, its history, and the current material conditions of 2019 as it is here in the United States, as well as the rest of the world. I mean, we're not going to dive into, a whole lot of detail. It's just going to be like an intro, to get you jump started into reading it if you decide, I want to read this for myself. But we're going to start on the history aspect because I want to touch on, my personal history as to what drew me to socialism. All right. Whenever I was 17 years old and a senior in high school, that's when I was given the talk by my parents to, you need to get your act together. You need to start getting your shit together to go out in the real world because, the way you're acting right now, you're not going to make it in the real world and this, that, and the other. Because I will admit at 17 years old, I was very lazy. My world consisted of wanting to just lay around the house, drink pop, drink beer, smoke weed, play video games, watch movies. That was really all I was doing at age 17. So whenever it came time for me to go out to the real world and get a job, I was very libertarianistic because, I enjoyed smoking weed. I wanted, marijuana legalization to come to a forefront. And at the time, the libertarians were really about the only ones who were pushing for marijuana legalization. And as time progressed, I started looking at more Marxist ideas. I got brushed up on when I was, looking for, the libertarian ideology before I formally declared myself a libertarian, but I was like a left libertarian. So I tried taking Marx's ideas and like having like this unique hybrid libertarian socialist philosophy, which people try to argue that Marxist Leninism is libertarian socialism, which it's really not. But that's really neither here nor there. And what really brought it to the forefront was when everyone kept saying that Barack Obama was a communist. He was this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, okay, I'm going to put this thing to rest once and for all. I'm going to prove or disprove this either right or wrong. Because I'm tired of people going back and forth at each other about them calling Barack Obama a communist. So I decided, okay, what is the main work that really brought out the socialist or communist philosophy? And then by research, I found the Communist Manifesto. So whenever I read the first line of the Communist Manifesto, there is a specter haunting Europe, the specter of communism. I said, ooh, this is a way to grab someone's attention. Because it makes you want to just read it and think, well, what is the specter he's really talking about? Because what is this thing haunting Europe? Because I knew it was written, in the 1800s. And as I read into it in the first chapter where it talked about, class struggles through the ancient times, medieval times, and now our current time. And I'm like, okay, this is getting interesting, but I really don't see how Obama is really pushing class struggle like a socialist or communist really would. So as I got more into it and I was reading how, Marx brushed upon different kinds of socialism that were developing in the 1800s. And by the time I was done reading it, and I got a good understanding as to what communism really is by the Communist Manifesto, I was like, you know what? These people are a bunch of fucking idiots. If they really honestly think just because Obama is doing this and that, just doing a few leftist things here and there just to try to, progress America in some regards, that's not communism.
Oh, he's definitely a corporatist Democrat or centrist, like some like to call them.
Right.
Yeah. Like Joe Biden is too,
Right, but after reading the Communist Manifesto, I felt empowered because it made me realize that, libertarianism is a bunch of bullshit. Because it was that moment I decided, you know what? I'm ditching libertarianism. Fuck this. I'm going to Marxism. And then I started reading other various works by Marx, like Das Kapital, as well as a few other various works by Marx. And then from there, I wanted to learn the philosophy behind Marxism. What really makes Marxist socialism so different from other 19th century ideas about socialism? His lifelong comrade, Friedrich Engels, I know not people really talk about Engels, but Engels is just as important as Marx when it came to the early writings of socialism and communism. He wrote an essay called Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. And from the surface, it looks like what Engels is trying to say is that our branch or our form of socialism is utopian and scientific. No, that's not what the essay is about. What the essay is about is the distinguishments of the different kinds of socialism, but the two specifically were utopian socialism and scientific socialism. But what the essay tried to convey was why scientific socialism was the correct form of socialism to follow. And what makes their socialism, scientific socialism, is they use what is called dialectical materialism to understand things and how to critique things. In layman's terms, dialectical materialism comes from the Greek word dialectics, meaning engaging, debate, and analyzation. It's not really as a debate as in, one side is trying to prove their side right and the other's wrong. It's just like an open exchange of ideas, but it requires analyzation of the ideas to see, is it right, is it wrong, and also to study contradictions within certain ideas. That's the dialectic part. Now, the materialism part, as I talked about in the previous video, Marx and Engels were diehard atheists. Religion had no kind of input in their philosophies. And materialism is also atheistic. What materialism does is it looks at things as they really are. That's the scientific approach for the dialectical materialism. Is they just look at things as they are without looking at it through religious aspects, through political aspects, like the one-sidedness, things like that. And when you combine the two of dialectical materialism, well, the dialectic and materialism, you get that unique hybrid philosophy, dialectical materialism. And what dialectical materialism does is it analyzes material conditions from a class perspective. That was the entire point of Marxism. Is he wrote about socialism and communism, but he also critiqued capitalism and how it was really just a development from the ancient world to feudalism and now our current world of capitalism. So that's how we critique things and how we look at things through our eyes when we're analyzing something. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a religious event. It could be like a political event. It could be just about anything. But we're going to look at it from that perspective and analyze it that way.
Yeah, or climate change, like conservatives ignoring the scientists.
Exactly.
There you go.
So what are your thoughts on dialectical materialism?
Well, under capitalism, they instead of looking at proven, hard-hitting facts, reality, science. They have their delusional ideologies, and they just kind of like make up their own rules and flip-flop and behave like spin doctors as they go along. Um, I'm 100% against capitalism from its inception, because it has, I think, in the long run, always failed the lower 98%.
Exactly.
And it's always been rigged. Like we were talking about the founding fathers. You had to be a rich Caucasian landowner to really enjoy the fruits of the new nation, of the young early America, the Constitution.
Right.
I mean, if you were, even throughout the 19th century and early part of the 20th century, if you were poor, you basically perished. So,
Right.
as far as dealing with reality, materialism, and respecting science, statistically, the proof is totally against capitalism. We were talking about upward mobility last week. The amount of people that were actually able to raise their standard of living under capitalism. The sort of rags to riches story that a lot of conservatives like to spout. He worked his way up from the bottom. He came to this country penniless, and now look at him. Yeah, like my late co-host used to say, under capitalism, if you do not get a big break in life from someone important, or multiple breaks, there's not going to be any upward mobility without receiving these so-called breaks, regardless where they come from. So yeah, I mean, socialism, communism, they respect the reality, looking at things, materialism,
Right.
and the real, like, this is just a stress ball made of latex or whatever the hell it's made out of. It's not really Donald Trump's head. That's the reality. But a conservative, a corporate suck up, would try to make this something real special on an infomercial and get people to part with their hard-earned money to buy this crap. You know what I mean?
All right. So getting to how the dialectic of materialism is actually applied, we talk about how it's applied, but how is it really applied using, the scientific method of scientific socialism? So they copied this idea from George Wilhelm Hegel. And what the end result was: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That is dialectical materialism at work. But how it is specific to scientific socialism is ruling classes and oppressed classes conflict and clash and combine. But the end result of what communism is supposed to be is the bourgeoisie and the proletariat clash. The end result is a classless society through scientific socialism.
Yeah. Hey, I just thought of something.
What?
Like let's touch upon a little science here. They most governments that, I don't know if it's only capitalist systems, but they are very determined to keep any extraterrestrial evidence a secret from the population. They want religion to thrive because I'm assuming religion controls the population.
Well, religion in itself, capitalism in itself is its own religion. The dollar is God. Anybody and everybody will do anything and everything to serve the dollar.
It's a cult, yeah. Yeah,
So
the dollar is God, and they convince you that you need to go out and shop at certain times of the year by the propaganda of all these bullshit commercials, Christmas carols, Christmas movies, making people feel guilty if they don't go out and spend money they may not have. And I know the whole deal. Fine jewelry, Zales, K Jewelers, Jared. I know what kind of markup they make. It's a
right,
huge scam. But the woman will make the man feel very guilty if he doesn't shell out, if he doesn't spend like several grand on a stone that is not investment quality. So
exactly,
yeah, so it's a carnival. It's a huckster, like a carnival barker or a carnival charlatan.
right,
Snake oil.
exactly.
Snake oil.
So getting back on to how it is applied, with the thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and ultimately the result of the class of society. That is what Marx and Engels said, that socialism is the biggest transitionary period and also a big historical development in terms of human history. You had early man, then you had, the hunter-gatherers of early man, then you had primitive accumulation, then you had the ancient world, and then feudalism, and then socialism, and then communism. So what socialism is, and this was also brushed on with Lenin, because Lenin was a Marxist, but he took Marxism and actually applied it. He took it from the book to reality. People say it looks good on paper but fails in theory. Well, what Lenin did was he took it from the paper and actually applied it. And guess what? It worked. So Lenin was a Marxist, but he also contributed onto Marxist theory. He actually took the ideas of Marx and Engels and applied them. Henceforth, why we had the first communist country, the Soviet Union. But how exactly did Lenin have theoretical contributions to Marxism to create the philosophy of Marxism-Leninism? As I was saying, he took the ideas and actually applied them in real life. And here's the contributions that he contributed. He took the ideas to the masses, but it was one thing to take the ideas to the masses. He actually had to have a government based on these ideas, because that's one thing Marx and Engels really didn't discuss, was how a socialist or communist government was supposed to be run. So Lenin came up with the idea of the single one-party system called the Communist Party. And that was the party of the Soviet Union, and what is here on my hoodie, the CCCP, the Central Committee of the Communist Party. And, they're elected officials just like, you would in a representative government. And then you have a chairman, which is like the president of the Communist Party. Because the Communist Party is really the party of the masses, and they have complete control in the country. And a lot of people put a lot of, faith and effort into the Communist Party, as well as the chairman or chairwoman. Let's not be sexist here. A chairwoman, there can be a woman elected to a position in a socialist or communist country. And he also presented the idea of not only how does the government, based on these ideas, work, he also gave, how can you really tell if, they're really not acting to these ideals? Because that's, one argument I always get. Well, if it's so good and if the government is corrupt, how can you really know if they are acting on the ideas or not? And the thing I'd just say is education. Read the works yourself. I mean, governments in the past have relied upon people's stupidity. People being educated is like the antithesis to their thesis, so to say.
That's probably why Republicans want to do away with public schools. They just want private schools to exist. They want to privatize absolutely everything. So the mainstream population can't afford private schools. So therefore, you dumb down the mainstream population, and they're easier to control.
Right. And to put in a nutshell, how everything is supposed to work, Lenin laid this out in his work called The State and Revolution. What is the role of the proletariat, and what is the role of the Communist Party, and what is the role of a socialist or communist government? Just to put it in layman's terms, in as simple, direct, forward way as possible. The work itself is really not that extensive. I mean, it's like 6 chapters, but it's very detailed. For it to be a work of what is supposed to be the work of the common man, it's really not written in common man language. You have to have a really good understanding of the English language, and you have to have really good reading comprehension, because there are sometimes, even when I'm reading these works, I'm even having trouble understanding what it is they're saying. And I have a pretty good reading comprehension skill, and I know the English language pretty well.
Would it be equivalent to reading lawyer language, like the legal language of lawyers? Is it that, or is it just very articulate as far as using the King's English and using more complex synonyms?
Using more complex synonyms, but it's very elaborate and very detailed. But the way they present it is, if you really have no background or understanding of what it is they're talking about, it's not really going to appeal to you, and you're really not going to understand it. You need a background to understand what it is that they're talking about. Because if someone were to just pick up, the Communist Manifesto or the State and Revolution and read it, they're going to be like, what the hell is this? Did someone pull this out of their ass? Like I said, it's not going to make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But that is how Lenin had his biggest contribution to what is, what a lot of socialists and communists practice is Marxism-Leninism. So the quick history of the Soviet Union with Lenin. So when Lenin came into power with the Bolshevik Revolution, he had Leon Trotsky as his second in command. But after Lenin died, after dealing with all the problems that he had to deal with, there was the end of World War I, and there was an imperialist invasion from the imperialist powers in Europe during World War I into Russia, and he sent Leon Trotsky to try to make peace or amends, and eventually he got them to get out of the war. But then there was the Russian Civil War, where those who were loyal to the Tsar were trying to overthrow the new Bolshevik government after the Bolshevik government overthrew the provisional government after Tsar Nicholas stepped down. So after he had the whole entire royal family executed in the late 19-teens, Lenin had a few years of, developing what would eventually become the Soviet Union. And then when he fell ill, he had to pick a successor. And he originally wanted Leon Trotsky to be his successor. And then Joseph Stalin made his ranks up through the Bolsheviks. And Leon Trotsky and Stalin hated each other, because Stalin was more of the alpha radical type of the Bolshevik, but even though Trotsky was a Menshevik at first, he was like the moderate voice. When he joined over to the Bolsheviks, he became like the moderate voice, and the two just conflicted and clashed. So after Stalin exiled Trotsky, Trotsky wrote various works when he was in exile. And what was the nail in Trotsky's coffin was he wrote how Stalin and Hitler were ultimately going to be in bed, even though the work itself is absolute garbage. Just the fact that he did that was, in Stalin's mind, going to be a big corrupter of what Lenin worked so hard to build, and that's why he got rid of him. Okay. And to this day, people say Stalin should not have been the ruler or the chairman of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. It should have been Trotsky. If Trotsky would have gone into power, I guarantee you that the Soviet Union would not have existed. Because like I said, where he was like the moderate voice of it, he was kind of more of the pacifist. He wanted to do a transition through the legislative means. In other words, he was primarily just a social democrat with Bolshevik colors on. And that's another reason why Stalin got rid of him, because he didn't have the revolutionary potential, but he also corrupted the revolutionary potential.
Okay.
And then under Stalin, there's this claim of, Stalin is responsible for the deaths of 10 million people and this, that, and the other. And I was talking about how that claim is from the Black Book of Communism, and the Black Book of Communism has been debunked so many different times that it's not even funny. But the real story of what happened was it was not 7 million dead in Ukraine because of a famine. So the real story behind it was in the 1930s, a unusual weather pattern swept through Eastern Europe, and Ukraine was very valuable in Eastern Europe because they had a lot of fertile land. And there was mass collectivization going on, and the kulaks and landlords during this famine decided to hoard grain and made people starve, and they jacked the prices of grain up. And Stalin and the Soviet Union said, no, you are not going to do this. So he sent them in and dealt with them, took their farms, and collectivized them so people could have food.
Okay.
How that equates to 10 million people dead and that's some kind of dictatorial despotism, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, of course, I told you the story about my Russian friend Alex bragging about how prosperous and low stress and happy his life was under Leonid Brezhnev living in the Ukraine.
Right.
And he says, don't believe the propaganda, the capitalist propaganda that has been shoved down your throat, as well as the altered history books that I was forced to study growing up.
Uh-huh. Well, right. And then getting back to Stalin.
Yeah.
So as Stalin was the chairman of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in the 1930s, while America was having the Great Depression, as a country, they were developing. And in fact, Stalin took Russia from a piss-poor, backward, third-world nation and turned it into a world superpower in less than 20 years. I mean, can the United States honestly say that it's done that? It took the United States much, much longer to become a world superpower than 20 years. And I hear this argument of, oh, Stalin used his reign of terror, used despotism, he used this, that, and the other. Okay, so as getting back to what I was telling you before, if he overthrew kulaks and landlords who were hoarding grain and making people starve, he went in and fixed the problem to where people can have food. That's dictatorial reign of terror, despotism. How? I don't understand that. I mean, if you have a leader who is that strong and willing to do that for his own people, that's going to empower people to actually, work and do stuff. But that seems to just not really comprehend with some people.
Yeah. And then what else came to my mind was how rapid science and technology has become in mainland China. They really are advancing at a rapid rate. So I'm putting all these facts between the United States, mainland China, Soviet Union, how happy they are in Scandinavia, and just collectively taking all these facts and it just proves how rigged capitalism is for the top 2%, and how it's a failure for the general population. I mean, it's common sense that the true consumers and the primary job producers and the backbone of the economy is the middle class. Lower 98%. The more money you put back in their pockets, the more the economy is stimulated. And of course, the capitalists can't seem to. They grasp it. They just don't want to grasp to accept it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so in the late 1930s, when Hitler began his conquest of Europe, Stalin signed a non-aggression pact, but that's where Trotsky really got himself killed and seen as a corrupter of the revolution and any kind of revolutionary potential. Was just because he signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler, that somehow means that, they're going to be in bed somehow. Yeah, even though Stalin signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler, he knew what Hitler was ultimately going to do. He knew that ultimately he was going to invade the Soviet Union. So yeah, that signing of the non-aggression pact was just for show. It was just like a gesture, a very empty, hollow gesture. So Stalin knew he had a very limited amount of time to get the Soviet army built up to get ready for a Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. Now, even though a lot of Russians and other various Eastern European countries as well as Western European countries died during World War II, the brunt force of the casualties was from the Soviet Union. Had the Soviet Union not actually stood up to Hitler and the Nazis and fought them, today we'd all be going, Heil Hitler. So in a lot of ways, Stalin actually saved the world because the United States really just had a occupying force to deal with, because when Hitler split his armies, that was his biggest mistake. I mean, military historians and tacticians have gone over this I don't know how many times. That was Hitler's biggest mistake, was splitting his army.
Well, the severity of the Russian winter did the same thing to Napoleon. It happened to Adolf Hitler. They couldn't get the supplies because when the Russians are used to their winter, it helped them out.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like.
But just because he split his army, what he did was when he split his army, he split it as an occupying force and an advancing force. I mean, it's good to have an advancing and an occupying force from a military tactician standpoint, but you don't want to split your army exactly 50-50. How you really want to split that is like 10% occupational and 90% advancement. You don't split it 50-50. Now, if Hitler had not made that mistake, because like I was saying, we'd all be going Heil Hitler today.
Yeah.
So while there was the campaign on the Eastern European front when the Nazis and the Soviet Union were fighting, Stalin and the Communist Party were under a lot of pressure because, they were tasked with defending their country. And if they failed, then everything was going to be put on them. So he had to make sure that, the Russian morality was at an all-time high, and that, they could actually show that the Red Army is doing good. We are doing good. We are going to win this war, because if we don't, we're fucked. Not only are we going to be fucked out of our governmental jobs, our country's going to be fucked because we're not going to have socialism and communism. We're going to have Nazism in our country. So whether you want to look at it from a self-preservation standpoint, the selfish way, or seeing the collective good really being at stake the other way, it's subjective. How you want to look at it is this, that, and the other. So at the end of the war, the United States and the Soviet Union met together in Berlin and hell. There's pictures online you can find of Red Army troops as well as United States troops, shaking hands together, smoking cigarettes, and sharing vodka together as a celebration of, hey, we defeated the world's greatest threat. That's something that they did together. I mean, granted, the Soviet Union did the most amount of work, but still, they both had their roles to play, and they were happy. They both achieved the goal together.
Mm.
But then after the war ended and there was the policy of containment, that's when you really saw the rise of socialist and communist countries. Maoist China came in 1949, North Korea came in 1950, and then you had the Soviet satellite states of Eastern Europe, the 1940s and the 1950s, and then you had Cuba and Vietnam in the 1960s. They really saw, the United States and capitalism and imperialism really saw that, I guess at first they might have underestimated it because they really didn't see how this was really going to play out, but they wanted to contain it. But the fact that they contained it made it that much worse. And this is something that we as Marxist, Leninist, Maoists are still talking about even today, is socialism became social imperialistic. No, it sounds like a contradiction. One thing that's supposed to be so against imperialism actually turned imperialistic itself.
Oh, so that's like that's the possibility of corruption in a socialist or communist system. Is
Exactly.
the way mainland China has embraced big business and capitalism for the very wealthy of mainland China.
That's not to say that, socialism and communism is inherently flawed. It's just that was an unknown that no one saw coming. I mean, there was no way you really could have analyzed that this was going to happen. It came out of the blue. This was, for once, we can honestly say there was no way to analyze or really predict that this was actually going to happen. Because after Stalin died in 1953 and Khrushchev came into power, that's when you saw a lot of social imperialism, where the Soviet Union really helped out a lot of countries. But that's when they really became imperialistic themselves to counter the United States' imperialism and the U.S. allies' imperialism. So it was like you had a war between capitalist imperialism and socialist and communist imperialism. That's what ultimately created the Cold War. And it became like, how can we outwit the other one rather than just actually focusing on the ideas? Because, like I was saying, Maoist China came in 1949, and whenever Mao was in power, early relations with the Soviet Union was very good. But I believe it was sometime in the 50s or 60s, I'll have to look on this a little bit more, there was what was called the Sino-Soviet split, where Mao saw what the Soviet Union was going to come of. And they did not want to have any kind of social democracy corrupt their system of government and then ultimately restore capitalism back into their country, because that's what they saw that Khrushchev was going to do. That's what is known as the Sino-Soviet split. So Soviet Union often went and did their own thing, and Mao and China often went and did their own thing as well. So as time progressed in the Soviet Union, we saw more and more social democratic, I'm trying to think of the word. I've done lost my train of thought, and I can't word on this one. We saw more of a transition to social democracy. There were pushes for alternative media, like liberal and conservative media. They were trying to undermine, the socialist revolution, the socialist and communist mindset, the single party system, because under Khrushchev, he brought in a lot of American goods into the Soviet Union. That's when we started seeing the selling of like jeans, Pepsi Cola, things like that. He gradually allowed capitalism back into the country through that method. And that's what, Maoist China saw. But as time progressed with Maoist China, Mao later on in life became really reactionary. That's a term. Are you familiar with that term, reactionary?
Reactionary is what my grandfather used to say about the right-wing capitalists. They're fascists. He used the word reactionary, corporate fascism. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Later on in life, Mao became extremely reactionary, and it became very abundantly clear when he wrote Mao's Three Worlds. And that's this argument that I get a lot about, Mao's Three Worlds, as Mao's Three Worlds and Maoist Third Worldism are like the same work, even though they're complete opposites. And in fact, they contradict each other. And when Mao died and the Gang of Four were outed, Mao, in some ways, with his Mao's Three Worlds, set the groundwork for capitalism to be reintroduced back into China in the 1980s, because Xi Jinping brought it back in through market reforms. And what really laid the groundwork for that was, in Mao's Three Worlds theory, he saw the Soviet Union as evil, but he was going to align with the United States to overthrow the Soviet Union. I mean, that's extremely reactionary thinking. That completely undermines your entire mindset and your entire revolution you fought so hard to get.
Yeah. I got a story to tell you.
So,
True story, but I just want to get your reaction.
All right.
My ex-wife, she's Colombian. She used to tell me a lot of things. I mean, the Colombian government was extremely right-wing, capitalist, and corrupt. It was like it was the pride and joy of the Bush administration. You know, he was very friendly with, at that time, the Colombian president. What she told me was the Civil War against the communist guerrillas. They would call the communist guerrillas the FARC,
Mm-hmm.
an acronym, I guess. She says that the right wing capitalist established government would commit acts of uh, terrorism against its own people and blame the FARC for doing it
Right.
in the media.
False flag terror operations.
Yeah, right. And she would tell me about this happening just to, you know, to make the people reject the FARC, the communist guerrillas,
Right.
and then you know, like it's yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. So that's like the very worst part of right wing propaganda. You know, to do that, to stop a bus of civilians and then machine gun them. You know, the Colombian army doing that, so they can blame the communist guerrillas for it. Yeah,
I'm not surprised because, like I said, I know I gave like a brief overview on Maoist China. I'll go into it more because I kind of went from like the beginning to the end, but I really didn't tell the middle. So, what were some good things that really happened under Maoist China? Well, Mao actually got his ideas from Stalin, not necessarily Stalinism. There's not really this thing called Stalinism. It's like this made up term that people like to throw out as like, you know, the corrupter of Marxism, Leninism, and this, that, and the other. And it's just like, it's a bunch of bullshit. So Mao was a Marxist Leninist, but when he applied socialism, and there actually, communism has been achieved before. It was actually achieved in some parts of Maoist China, believe it or not. He took Marxism, Leninism, and he advanced it, so to speak. He made it much more scientific in the dialectical materialistic way because it required more of the Chinese people becoming more involved with the Marxist-Leninist ideology and wanting the people to have more of a creative input onto it, so to speak. Like, you know, having a much better educational system where there could be a much more open and freer ideas for theoretical contributions. And it required the mass line, so to speak. That was what Mao created, was the mass line. Right. You know, the best of all of the ideas being pushed to the forefront. And a lot of great things happened under Maoist China. The population doubled, despite what people want to think. Mao killed 100 million of his own people. Okay, like I was saying, you know, the way to double your population is to kill 100 million of it. Makes total sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the population of the country doubled from 400 and some odd million to over 900 and some odd million. I mean, that's amazing if you really think about it. Healthcare really improved. Education really improved, because if you would have gone back to Maoist China and see just how educated the Chinese people were becoming, you would be extremely, extremely amazed. So that was one thing Mao really pushed for Maoist China, is to really be educated. The exact opposite of what China is really doing now. In fact, China really doesn't want people to really be educated, because there is a resurgency of Maoism in China right now, like actual real Maoism in China, not this fake Communist Party of China that's really just more capitalistic than the United States. No, I'm talking like actual, real Maoism, the resurgence of Maoist guerrilla fighters wanting to overthrow the government, retake back the country, and reinstate Maoism back into the country. And the government is suppressing it like that. So if China's really communist, why would they be suppressing something like that? In fact, they would be probably embracing it, shouldn't they?
They want all those massive amounts of drones and lemmings to work all the outsourced American jobs for corporate America. That's over there, and then now I hear they're trying to outsource to Bangladesh because they work for less, but it's greed. I mean, for Chinese companies to want to outsource to Bangladesh, that makes them no better than corporate America.
Yeah, but I was also telling you, Mao really wanted people to be educated, but he also wanted people to be armed. That's why for them to say that, Mao took guns, well, why would he want people to be armed if he was trying to take away guns? That is so idiotic. That's like selling your vehicle for gas money. That's just how idiotic of a statement or a claim that really is.
Well,
because in rural areas, you would not believe just how armed the Chinese people were. Because you had the Chinese Red Guard, you had the Chinese People's Army, things like that, ensuring that the Chinese people were really armed. I mean, that's the biggest thing about a socialist or communist country is making sure that people are armed, not taking away guns. In fact, if anything, they give guns to the people.
Right.
But as I was, talking about the Sino-Soviet split and then how Mao became more reactionary later on in life and how it led the groundwork for capitalism to be reinstalled in the 1980s, it really ultimately affected the one country that really had the greatest revolutionary potential, North Korea. I know we talked about the truth. I know you put it in the last video, the truth about North Korea. I mean, Kim Il-sung nowadays should be right up there with the great contributors of socialist and communist theory, along with Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Mao. I mean, he today has socialism in his country, and I should say North Korea still has socialism in their country, and they still are keeping the United States at bay, despite the fact they've been sanctioned and isolated from the rest of the world. I mean, to me, that just goes to show you that, that has the greatest revolutionary potential, don't you think? I mean, they've withstood the test of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I was telling you about North Korea and how really we as socialists and communists should really be praising them and really looking at them is, like I said, they've withstood the test of time. They've not become reactionary. They've not become, capitalistic in any regard. They've stood up to the United States and imperialism, as well as any kind of U.S. allies and any kind of imperialism out of anybody. I mean, hell, even to this day, they are still keeping China and Russia out of their country.
Yeah, and they're breathing down Japan's neck too, probably more than anyone else. But the last segment of the show, we should talk about the sudden surge in popularity of socialism today. How
current material conditions.
How it's being embraced by more Americans than ever before.
I mean, I've seen things like this, but I don't really know if America is really ready for socialism. I mean, they may talk that they're ready for socialism, but I don't think they're really ready for a revolution to really overthrow capitalism and overthrow the government and install a new government. I really don't think America is really ready to do that.
Yeah, because many of the Democrat candidates are loosely using the word progressive, but they're really not progressive.
Exactly.
You can't be progressive if you're a centrist Democrat or moderate Democrat. So there's no way. that you're a true progressive. So they're using it, I guess, as a way of pandering to the lower 98% for votes, to the minority, to the poor, college kids, women. You know, it's a pandering tactic. But if they're in reality moderate centrists, they're not true progressives.
Right. Like, and I'm glad you brought this up because I know we've talked about this in previous videos. Because, like I was saying, I don't think America really has the revolutionary potential at this moment. That's not to say that they never will have revolutionary potential at this moment, but just as it sits right now, they're at this point. We're at this point to where it's just like, you know, people realize that the system does not work for them, but they're at the same time too afraid to really step up and do what is necessary to really make a system that works for them, i.e., socialism.
Yeah,
It's just
a peaceful hipster Barney the dinosaur protest. I love you, you love me is going to do absolutely nothing, and this is what we're getting from today's progressives or progressive Democrats. The our revolution, independence. We're getting all this hipster crap where they feel that if they picket and and chant and arm in arm, hand in hand, no, that's not going to do a damn thing against the forces of evil. They don't play fair like that. They don't make nice.
Exactly. So, like I was saying, it's not that America does not have revolutionary potential. They just don't have it at this moment because, like I was saying, they're complacent to a certain extent. It's like where they realize now that the system does not work for them and is never going to work for them, that the wool that's been pulled over their eyes is now gone. They're like in this conundrum. It's like, do we really want to keep the system and just perpetuate this bullshit, or do we step up and do what is necessary to actually, make a system that works for us, meaning overthrowing the one that we have?
There's very
I'm talking like a legislative overthrow. I'm talking like actually rising up and taking the government back.
Well, there's very few proactive progressives. There's very few true progressives, and there's even less proactive ones. Because I'm running this ad to get people to join us on meetup.com. Nothing. I place it on Twitter. Nothing. People are sycophants. They are spineless sycophants is what they are. And also there are Pollyannas that stick their head in the sand like an ostrich that just, they're ultra liberals that desperately want everyone to like them, approve of them, love them. And they don't want to offend anyone. Heaven forbid they should be offensive to someone. I can't get anybody except you and I. Nobody wants to step to the plate and put their mug, put their voice, put their face on a live stream show and say, I am a progressive activist and I am pissed off at our system. It doesn't work for the average mainstream American. I want to do something about it. I'm part of this. Nobody's stepping up. They're all sycophants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But where in the world would there really be the greatest revolutionary potential? Right now, the biggest part of the world that has the biggest revolutionary potential is the third world because, people are always talking about, the failures of socialism. Well, where has really capitalism succeeded? Where has it really set out to do the mission that it said it was set out to do?
Well, hey, I mentioned Colombia, South America. There's virtually no middle class or not much of one. It's you got the poor, you got the wealthy. And that's how it is in the Philippines. And that's how it is in most likely every third world country today.
Exactly, and that's a Fidel Castro quote, by the way, they want to talk about the failures of socialism, this, that, and the other. Well, where's the success of capitalism really been? Nowhere.
Because if capitalism was truly successful, you would have a prosperous 1950s Eisenhower middle class.
Exactly.
Which is probably the best decade in United States history. With oh, by the way, with the high tax rate on the rich, I think it was like 91%.
Exactly. So it's just like, we don't have that here in the United States, but the third world, because the third world really gets the boot of capitalism. They really get the boot heels of capitalism. You know, what me and you were talking about, people are going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're not oppressed. We're not poor. I mean, yeah, granted, we are oppressed and poor here in the United States. Granted, is it as bad as the third world? No. Because that's really, where do you think we get our benefits and where we get a higher standard of living from? The exploitation of the third world.
Hey, there's a lot of middle class people that today in America that are lucky enough to still have their jobs that are this close from being practically in the poorhouse and getting their mortgage foreclosed.
Mm-hmm.
So it can happen. It can happen to all these people that are online bragging, waving the American flag. Yeah, Yankee Doodle Dandy. We're the best. We're the best. God bless America. Bah, 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 bah. Yeah, right. Until you get laid off.
That was what neoliberalism really was about. Was they wanted to export jobs out of the United States because the bourgeoisie really did not want to pay the American workers the way they really needed and should have been paid. So they're like, well, you know what? Fuck you. We'll just go elsewhere. We'll go to these third world countries where they're more appreciative to have jobs, and the third world embraced it, and now they are paying the price for what they've embraced.
Well, conservative capitalists always say they're lucky to have a job at all. I'm telling you, the girl I lived with in the 1980s, her mother was very wealthy, owned the company in Mineola, Long Island, and her employees were underpaid. Nothing new there, and that's her comment. They're lucky to still have a job. They should be thankful they got a job. Oh, really? Okay. All right. So, which means I don't give a damn if they can't make ends meet. And yeah, and that's what they're exploiting those people in third world countries when they outsource. And what I would do is, even though a lot of people say, even some Democrats tell me, oh, no, tariffs are bad. They're bad. No, they're not. You want to be a greedy prick and you want to outsource American jobs? Okay, when you bring those products back to off the cargo ships to the U.S. ports, we're going to tariff the hell out of you.
Exactly. I mean, to be honest, it should not have happened because I want everyone to have a job, okay? Because this is where I stand on it. I'm not really a first worldist, but I'm not a first worldist, but I'm not really a third worldist. I really like to consider myself like, I want everyone to have jobs. I want everyone to have education. I want everyone to have healthcare. I want everyone to live under socialism. I want the whole world to be socialist because
have a living wage.
Yeah, have a living wage. Actually have a good standard of life.
Yeah, like Norway pays people $800 a month just to be a citizen, from what I understand.
But we're not going to do it like that through like a universal basic income. And we've talked about that in the Marxist community as well. I don't like it. I mean, it's a great idea, but I don't really like it. It wouldn't really work in a capitalistic system. In a socialist system, maybe, question mark. But I don't know. I've not really put a whole lot of time and effort into thinking about that. But anyway, getting back to the third world, that's where all the exploitation is going on. But the third world is starting to rise up and rebel against the first world, and they're also starting to step up and rebel against the United States, our allies, and imperialism as well as neoliberalism, because while though it was something that they embraced at first, they saw exactly what they embraced and they regret it, but now they want to fix their mistake. And the United States, imperialism, capitalism, and its allies are just saying, no, we're not having this. Yeah, because if I went to a third world country where they are really being exploited by capitalism, what me and you are talking about, it is going to register like that, like that, like that, like that, and it'll be like preaching to the choir. Now, here in the United States, in the first world, I mean, there are people here in the first world that embrace it, but it's few and far between.
Yeah, it's like when is a wild animal most dangerous? When it has absolutely nothing to lose and you corner it.
Exactly.
People are the breaking point, the straw that broke the camel's back. And granted, this is what Republicans are telling, what do you call people in Central America. Oh, well, they should revolt against their corrupt system. Yes, they should, if someone is arming them and helping them out.
I mean, Juan Guaido in Venezuela is a right-wing nationalist backed by the United States. I'm glad that I'm glad Nicolas Maduro and the Venezuelan government have investigated him and have charged him and have taken necessary actions against him. But I think ultimately, I don't think they've done enough. I mean, not being allowed to run in a government position for 15 years and not throwing him in prison or executing him for an extreme subterfuge of government. I mean, Juan Guaido should be made an example of.
Now, what happened in Brazil? I used to see a lot of posts on Twitter about the election that they had in Brazil a while ago. Who got elected? I mean, what type of politician?
I really don't pay a whole lot of attention to Brazil because nothing really comes out of it. It seems like right now it's kind of irrelevant.
Oh, okay, yeah. Whereas the U.S., of course, has an interest in Venezuela because of big oil. Brazil is just one big party town, party country, basically. Yeah. They don't. There's no. In other words, there's no significant natural resource coming out of Brazil. So it's
right.
Yeah.
But getting back to Nicolas Maduro and Venezuela, to be honest, they should get Juan Guaido in prison and execute him. Make him an example of that. Foreigners are not going to come into our country, try to overthrow us, and expect nothing bad to happen. Because that is definitely what I would do. If I were Nicolas Maduro, I'd bring socialism in its entirety. We'd have a socialist revolution, kick OPEC out, nationalize everything, make everything of, for, and by our people, and then ramp up our military and make any kind of foreign interventionists examples of.
So is this why the Venezuelan population are starving? There's a lack of food?
Yes, because the United States is committing terroristic acts against Venezuela. Like getting back to what I was saying, anytime socialism succeeds, the United States and capitalism and imperialism cannot stand to see the success of socialism because it completely undermines them. It's like the antithesis to their thesis. So their synthesis, get rid of the problem. And they're going to do it by any means necessary. They're going to do it through starvation. They're going to do it through terroristic acts. They're going to do it through any means necessary to show, oh, hey, look, socialism's failing, but we're the culprits of it.
Now, bringing us up into the present, I notice I made a comment on Twitter to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's remark about a debate she had with a right-wing Republican imbecile, and well, she didn't use the word. She tried to have a fair debate with him, and of course, you really can't. It always ends up bad. And someone posted a comment calling him a name, which was appropriate. And she says, like in her own words, now, let us debate, but not debase. And my comment was, respect is to be earned.
Right.
If the person is an asshole or idiot asshole combination or a greedy, corrupt prick, then they're not entitled to respect and a fair debate because they will not debate fairly with you based on facts. So if, let's say, AOC is throwing facts in a debate, or let's say there's a town hall meeting and she's being factual and the other person is avoiding certain subjects, like it could be anything, it could be scientific evidence of climate change, blah, 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 global warming, and you're getting bullshit in return, then that person is not entitled to the respect in a fair debate. So this is what these, getting back to the ultra liberal that are so desperate not to offend anyone and to be liked by everybody. One of the flaws of many of these Democrats today, that I don't want them to think that if you're a true progressive, that you're a pussy. To put it in layman's terms.
Well, the put it into a different perspective, like if you're going to go about that route, I mean, Trump actually had the greatest potential to really, get the American people riled up, but he did it in all the wrong ways. I mean, it was good that he got the American people riled up, but he did it in all the wrong ways. He brought out the bad in people. Like, he brought out the racism, he brought out the sexism, he brought out the bigotry, he brought out the hatred, the intolerance, this, that, and the other. And it's just, that was potential, but he failed to do it.
I mean, it could happen. It could happen to you. Let's say some media network says, "Hey, I saw this Gary W. Owens. We dig where he's coming from. We're going to invite him on to debate somebody." Debate somebody. Let's say it's over global warming. Oh, the poles are melting. Blah blah blah. And then you get somebody saying, that it's all lies, and some big oil suck up is like acting like a real numbskull trying to debate you. I mean, it's going to come to a point where you're going to get so frustrated. You're going to say to yourself, "I can't debate this jerk off." I mean, I got to get tough with him. Now if you don't get tough with them, they start talking over you. They start like raising their voice and drowning you out. That's what these ultra right-wing corporate whore capitalists do. They like Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne Conway does that when she's on CNN all the time.
Oh, I know the liberals and the nannies and the pussies are going to say, "Oh, you're sexist because you called a woman who's a cunt."
She's got a mouth like Julia Roberts. It's really big, and she's yapping louder and louder, and she's cutting off Chris Cuomo. Boom, 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 and then he has to he gets irate, and then she gets worse, more obnoxious, and in reality. She's like Huckabee Sanders there. Somebody told me she has a glass eye. She's not inbred. That's what somebody told me.
I don't know, but I honestly, I probably would never come on mainstream media just because of the fact of I would not get any kind of accurate reporting on what it is that I said. They would take little tidbits of what I say and make me look like a fucking idiot and just discredit me, because anytime someone that comes on, they don't toe any kind of liberal or conservative mainstream agendas or lines, what have you, they'll either shut them down or they'll make them look like the biggest fucking idiots through video editing to completely discredit them. That's why I will never go on Fox. I will never go on CNN or MSNBC.
Oh, they'll definitely censor you, and I can't say it. Rachel Maddow is a big corporate.
Oh God, Rachel Maddow.
Hey, Maddow, stick this blackthorn shillelagh where the sun don't shine.
I will go into this now. Rachel Maddow is like that onion that really just makes me want to cry. Not because of all of the additives that get released from the onion as you're cutting it. No, it's like she's like the onion that really makes me want to cry because it's so damn smelly and so damn ugly. It's like, how can something be so stinky and smelly and ugly? That's horrible.
She's a drama queen, and she, 2016, she sure her jism was flowing that Hillary won the nomination, and then it wasn't Bernie. And to put it in crude, well, we don't have any censorship on our show, so I can say jism. But anyway, jismatic. It
Yeah.
slices, it dices.
Well, I guess. I mean, we got about 12 minutes, so I guess this last part we'll just talk about random material conditions. It could just be about anywhere. We'll talk about different things about what's going on throughout the rest of the world.
Oh, science! Remember you told me the first artificial heart?
Yeah, it came out of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, the space program with the space stations. Hey, I mean, they didn't do so bad. China has a space program that is pretty damn good that the U.S. media never talks about.
Right. But another interesting fact, for socialism to be this huge failure, you want to know an interesting fun fact? North Korea has a satellite in space. South Korea does not.
Really? Isn't
Yeah.
it funny how we never hear about it on mainstream American news networks?
Granted, their space program is in its infancy stage, but hell, I mean, that's still pretty impressive for them to say that, North Korea is so poor, they're so dictatorial and despotic that they can barely feed their own people, but yet they've got a fucking satellite in space. I mean, if they were really that bad off, would they really have a satellite in space? No.
You know what I should do? The mainland Chinese news network is on. They have many videos on YouTube. I should find the video showing their space station and their shuttle, and and mainland China's up there. We don't hear a word about any of it. Not even the North Korean satellite from American mainstream.
It got its way into the news media. I think it was like 2014 or 2015, I believe. There was a big scare about them launching a satellite into space, but yet it really just turned out to be nothing. All they did was just send a satellite into space to show, hey, we've got advancement in our space program. I mean, it wasn't to create some new Cold War or to have Star Wars where Reagan comes back from the grave, we engage in Star Wars and this, that, and the other. It's just, that's all it was, an advancement in their space program.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, lasers work much better in a vacuum of outer space. So that's but anyway,
we can talk about North Korea for a little bit because right now I want to really talk about what goes on with them because, like I was saying, we as socialists and communists should really be praising North Korea because they're like the last real stronghold of any kind of socialist or communist remnants. That's not this liberal social democratic bullshit. And I do want to kind of clarify what I was talking about earlier. I meant to say democratic or social democracy with aspects of socialism in Venezuela. I mean, they can't even stand to see any kind of socialism come out in any kind of successful amount because they can't stand it because it completely undermines them. But that's really neither here nor there. I just want to just clarify that. Yeah. So what's coming out of North Korea, they're not going to be giving up their nuclear weapons. No matter what they try to negotiate or what Trump tries to negotiate with them, they're not going to give up their nuclear weapons. It's not going to happen. He should just scrap this because it's not going to happen.
And they're not going to give up that submarine with the 25-foot sail that's capable of firing vertically missiles. They're not giving that one up.
They actually, even though they've destroyed some nuclear testing sites, they're still building up their nuclear arsenal because although they now have nuclear weapons and any kind of nuclear weapon is a deterrent from anyone coming in and invading your country is good, it's a great thing to bring to the table as a negotiation tactic because it says, hey, recognize us as a legitimate country. Or if you try to invade us to try to show, hey, we're not a legitimate country, we will deal with you with nuclear weapons. And that is why they will not give it up.
Yeah.
And I will also say this now. Kim Jong-un has in some ways played Trump like a fiddle. because he sees just how idiotic Trump really is. And even to a certain extent, he played Obama. I mean, that's one good thing about Kim Jong-un is he's very smart, he's very educated, and you cannot pull the wool over his eyes. You pull any bullshit, he is going to call you out on it.
He probably was hysterical about Donald Trump's comment about the love letters between them, and we have a love affair, some crap. You remember when Trump was talking about when he it was a while back. I think it was last year.
Well,
Yeah.
and also to put it into perspective, Kim Jong-un he's not really a dove, but he's not really a war hawk. He's like right in the middle. He could go either way. He wants peace, but he's not afraid to go to war.
Yeah.
With anybody.
His sister's very pretty, by the way. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
that's what makes him so good at negotiating is he likes to have the dove, or he likes to have the olive branch, and he likes to have the arrows in both hands pointing at you, saying, you have two choices. You can pick peace, or you can pick the olive branch. I'm not afraid to pick either or. I can pick either or at a moment's notice. It relies upon you. My decision relies upon your decision.
Yeah, I mean,
Dennis Rodman was in the country, and he visited Kim Jong-un, and they watched basketball because North Koreans love basketball. So when Dennis Rodman went over, he was talking about his conversation he had with Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong-un said, I don't want to go to war. I really honestly do not, because I know it's going to cost time, it's going to cost money, and it's going to cost my people's lives. But I will do it if I have to. He said, I want to make amends with the United States. I want to make peace with the United States. I want to reunite our country. And if that means we remain two separate countries, but still we just have one flag of Korea.
Well, the best thing the United States and China can do is, offer ways to help the North Korean economy, to improve the standard of living of their people.
They are. That's what I was talking about in my previous video is that's why even though China and Russia are imperialistic, they're not going to go in and overthrow the government because they have vested interest in the country. Because, I mean, even though North Korea has sanctions against them, China and Russia, even still today, are helping them out. They're kind of undermining the sanctions that have been placed against the country.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, North Korea will gain their independence, but they better be damn good ready and have everything, all their T's crossed, all their I's dotted to try to kick out Russia and China. They will get to a point to where they can do that. Because, like I was saying, Kim Jong-un is really coming back to Juche, and he really wants the country to become independent to where they can be 100% self-reliant, where they don't have to rely upon China or Russia anymore.
Oh, by the way, how is capitalism treating South Korea as a whole?
Yeah, I'm glad you talk about that, because in South Korea, there is a lot of sentiment at Kim Jong-un, and it's not negative. In fact, if anything, it's positive. And the reason why he is gaining so much popularity in the South is, Kim Il-sung had his own little following and he had his own certain amount of people in South Korea that liked him. Kim Jong-il had his own, but not really as much. But what has really made him popular, Kim Jong-un popular in the South, is he's willing to sit down with the South Korean president Moon Jae-in to reunite Korea and also end the Korean War, because South Koreans are tired of living under the threat of invasion from the North. And they're just thinking, well, hell, if that means kicking the United States out and ending the Korean War to fix this problem, then that's a sacrifice we are willing to make, because the American troops and capitalism that's in South Korea, the American troops are treating the South Korean people like shit. They don't adhere to their laws whatsoever.
South Korea doesn't need the United States any longer. Nah.
Well, they don't need them any longer, but that's what's fueling the fire is how the United States troops are treating the South Korean people. Like, they'll go in to Seoul or they'll do this, that, and the other, and they'll get into trouble and they think they're above the law.
Oh, like they were doing in the Middle East, just like raping women and doing all kinds of vile things when the troops were.
And how else has capitalism treated South Korea? I mean, it treated South Korea good for a while, but like I was saying, where capitalism has developed so much and how the bourgeoisie have become so complacent themselves as well as the proletariat that they just become so rich in their power, so entrenched that really who's out there to stop them?
Yeah.
I mean, South Korea is starting to become despotic. Their standard of living is going down. Their jobs are going down. Their economy is starting to go down. It's going to be bad.
Now, what I don't like is with communist countries is they don't have free, open, worldwide internet access. Like China, like my friend in Shanghai, China says, if I go to Hong Kong, I have open, free, worldwide internet access, but not in Shanghai, or of course Taiwan does, but mainland China does not. And I guess North Korea is the same way.
I mean, this has been reported on, and they must have some kind of outside knowledge of what's going on outside their borders. They must have some degree of free access to internet or television because, like I was saying, there's this claim that they're so isolated from the rest of the world. But then yet, if they really were in this so isolated of a bubble, how would they really know that Kim Jong-un is having summits with Donald Trump and the United States and North Korea are trying to come to some kind of peace agreement?
Yeah, you mentioned that last week, actually.
So it's just like, I call bullshit. I mean, it's probably not, hell, even our internet access is not 100% free. So really, it's just like it's a apples to oranges comparison.
Oh, there's lots of, there's all kinds of censorship with the American internet. I mean, every time, one time I got a warning from Facebook concerning Facebook Messenger, about the nature of my conversation. I think I sent him a message back. I said, my private conversations are really none of your business. It's not like I'm doing it publicly. I'm doing it privately. And I get a warning about the Facebook community standards, which is hypocritical as hell, because they spam the hell out of you, including your private Facebook Messenger conversations. You'll now find spam because of Mr. the control freak geek with the hawk nose. Hey, that's capitalism for you.
The last thing we'll talk about how capitalism has not really treated South Korea good for this last week. I mean, it did as a front to show the failures of socialism, but now that all that's just gone by the wayside, they really just honestly could care less anymore. If Che Guevara were still alive, I think he probably would have moved to North Korea because it's like the last real remnants of any kind of socialism left, like real hardline Marxist-Leninist socialism or communism left in this world. And where they've now gone away from Saigon, their military first policy, now back to Juche, their country is doing great. Despite what other people want to say, think, believe, what have you, they're doing great. I mean, there's this thing that they say that you can't have a cell phone in North Korea. Yeah, people own cell phones in the country. You say they can't own computers. They own computers in the country, so you can't own a car. There's people in the country that own cars. It's just what they say about this country. It's not true. It's really just not true, and it can be easily disproved. But getting back to Che Guevara was probably one of the greatest Marxist-Leninist revolutionaries ever to walk the face of the earth, because this is what I really have great respect for with Che Guevara. He, in some ways, came from the bourgeois intelligentsia to a certain regard. He was born in Argentina. He wasn't really all that educated at first, nor was he really all that wealthy. I mean, he was very, very poor. But when he went through the education system, at that time it was the bourgeois intelligentsia, he went through Latin America and saw how Latin Americans really were living, and he did not want to see people in Latin America living that way. So when he was developing his own revolutionary ideology, and he paired up with Fidel Castro, and there was the Cuban Revolution, then there was the Bay of Pigs, and after the Bay of Pigs, Che Guevara and Fidel Castro had a huge falling out. Here was their fallout. After the Bay of Pigs, Fidel Castro just wanted to leave things as is. Well, Che Guevara was of the complete opposite opinion. He did not want to leave things as is. He said, because of the United States coming in and trying to overthrow our revolution, we are to nuke the United States. He was ready to get the Soviet Union back in here with the nukes to nuke the United States. He was going to really deal with the problem once and for all, because he saw the United States failed at overthrowing their revolution after kicking out their puppet government. So he said, you know what? Kick them while they're down. Let's hit them while they're down.
Was that Nikita Khrushchev at JFK during that period? Yeah. Okay.
But Fidel Castro said, no, I am not going along with this. So in a nutshell, Che Guevara said, you know what? Fuck you, you fucking pussy ass bitch. I'm going to go outside this country. I'm going to start other revolutions that are going to have more potential than this, and who are going to eventually invade the United States and overthrow it. So he left Cuba. He started different revolutions throughout various countries. He did it in Latin America. He did it in Africa. But the United States just kind of ignored him until he really got personal with the United States. And he got more personal with the United States than anybody else in the world ever did. When he got to Bolivia and was going to have the Bolivian Revolution. At the time in Bolivia, there was a lot of rampant drug production in the country. There was drug lords and things like that, and that's how a lot of the Bolivian people survived, was because of drugs.
Oh, I didn't know coca leaves grow well in Bolivia.
I think, yeah, it was like different kinds of drugs to my knowledge, but yeah, it was, drug dealing down in Bolivia. Well, Che Guevara had this idea of, okay, the United States has this war on drugs at home, but yet they're having no problem accepting money from drug lords outside the United States to fuel their drug war. So I'm going to get really personal with them. It ultimately cost him his life, but he said, I'm going to get really personal with them. So he riled up the Bolivian people, and there was going to be a Bolivian revolution. And the first thing they were going to do, kick out anything drug-related out of the country. That really pissed off the United States. So the United States sent in the CIA, and they cornered Che Guevara. And they had their guns drawn and were getting ready to kill him. And his famous last words, he said, I know you have come here to kill me, so go ahead and shoot me, coward. You're only going to kill a man. And he was shot over 6 times point blank.
Point blank, and he didn't have any military personnel around him at the time, obviously.
Right. But that's why I have great respect for him, because he really was like the alpha of the alphas of socialists and communists. If he was willing to nuke the United States and go to war with the United States and overthrow imperialism and capitalism once and for all, when other countries were kind of too complacent to do it, you got to have respect for that. And for him to say, go ahead, shoot me. You're only going to just kill a man, so go ahead and shoot me, coward.
You think that's why the U.S. is still in Afghanistan, because of the Taliban opium production? The Taliban drugs? Yeah.
But if you go to Bolivia today, you will see posters of Che Guevara. I mean, I've got a Che Guevara poster over here on my wall.
Well, his T-shirts are very popular. I'll tell you that. I see them all the time.
Yeah, but they're like, They're only just looking at him as like a symbol of rebellion. They're just taking it at that face value. He's just this symbol of rebellion without actually really knowing what the rebellion really is. And that's why I get so pissed off about people wearing it. Is they see the symbol of rebellion, but they really don't know what the rebellion really is.
It's like when college kids were camping out during the Occupy Wall Street fiasco, and there were intense partying, like a bunch of hippies, and they they found it as an excuse to party and hang out at a social gathering. I bet a lot of them really didn't grasp the importance of Occupy Wall Street, but then again, they did not have a good, strong leader like we talked about last week. So it's a similar thing. Jacob Art, the T-shirts is a sign of rebellion, like you said, but they do not know the full history of him and what he was about.
And then when the right wingers say, this guy was an evil, despotic dictator who killed hundreds of thousands of people, you college liberal artard. I'm like, no, he was not this despotic dictator that killed thousands of people.
What? Hey, it reminds me of the recent Tricky Dick documentary where Richard Nixon says, we have to pull out of Vietnam. We have to pull out of Vietnam. Then he changed his mind. And then the college students really got pissed, with the protesting, and then you had the violence against the college student protesting and everything.
I mean, Vietnam was like, another attempt to try to contain communism, but it didn't work. So the last thing, and I promise we'll wrap this up because my T-ball practice here in a little bit. So what really caused the collapse of socialism and communism throughout the world? It wasn't because of some inherent flaw with the system. Granted, social imperialism had its role to play, but really what ultimately undermined the collapse of the evil empire, as they like to call it, like I say, nothing to do with the inherent flaws of the system. Social imperialism even had its role.
It's not wrong.
Capitalism really caused socialism to be, it basically just caused it to collapse. It undermined it by, first it was social democracy with Khrushchev and Brezhnev, and then liberalism, the sealer of the deal with Gorbachev, and that's how it ultimately just fell. It got undermined, chipped away, and then overthrown by capitalism. That's why I keep saying you cannot have social democracy and expect it to work. And that is why social democracy is so antagonistical to real socialism. Because like I said, there's no real revolutionary potential to not only keep revolutionary potential and to actually throw capitalism out of your country. It's not going to happen.
Right. Absolutely. You know what? Thank you, Gary W. Owens, for another heavy, hard-hitting blockbuster show. And every show kind of outdoes the one before it.
Mm-hmm.
We did discuss some new topics, and we did a little rehashing of the week before. Reviewing of the week before. But
right.
You have a good time in a little bit.
All right.
Personal engagement there, and we'll talk.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.